pre-war apartments that you can't do that. So anyway, just saying.
All right, so I just recorded just in time to hear Roberto Cabrera explain that because of the phenomenon of more metrosexuals, we have changing bathroom tastes. Wait, what?
You missed all the context. You recorded just the end.
Well, it's 4 o'clock. It's time to start the call. I see that we have Ari Harkov is in the house. Where are you?
Hey guys, how are you?
There you are.
I don't see Ari.
Oh no, he's over there. He's down in the lower left. And I see Eileen Hanford, my star, and I do mean star, from Darien, Connecticut, because has Darien ever been hotter than it is right now, Eileen?
No, it has never been hotter than it is right now. And I've been in the business 40 years. I've done $1 billion in real estate sales, and I've never had a year like this one. It's been January and February, I knew we were going to have a great year. March 15th, when it went to a dead stop, I thought, oh my God, what has happened, right? But it was a brief one. And then we were inundated with phone calls. I think I had 50 a day because I have a lot of listings to rent. Everyone wanted a 3-month rental out of Manhattan. Not everyone, but quite a few. And I felt the need to help. I'm a native New Yorker and I love New York City. And so I'm from one of the boroughs, and I wanted to help my fellow New Yorkers. And they were paying prices for rent that we'd never received, right, John?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
We were like, well, you can't pay that much, right? But they just wanted them. And I even had a bidding war on a property that was on the market for sale for $4,395,000. It went to multiple bids. It was not on for rent. My client had direct phone calls, and we ended up renting it for 3 months. Then another 3 months, and then they were not planning on ever leaving the city, and they ended up buying. So, I mean, I've never seen a market like this in my 40 years.
All right, we'll just use that as a amuse-bouche. Let me start the way a professional would really start, by introducing who's here and what we're doing, right? So let me see if I can can I share my screen? I can share my screen. And I think you can all see it. I have Ari Harkov as my special guest today, and he leads the Harkov-Lewis team in Greenwich Village, but he covers the whole New York City. He's one of the top 250 teams in the U.S. I think you're what, 146 or something right now? Where are you right now?
I don't recall where we were last year. I try not to pay too much attention to that.
Probably climbing the charts as we speak. And so it says here you represent developers, buyers, sellers, major landlords, property owners, everything. And you have a team of how many people?
13.
Awesome. Ooh. Awesome. And my other special guest, Eileen Hanford, from Darien, and you've been in the business over 30 years. And we just got a little bit of taste of what Eileen's going through now. She says that she's having the year of her career, and Darien certainly is having a phenomenal year, and Connecticut generally is having a phenomenal year. So we want to get more into why and how long that's going to last. And I want to hear from Eileen on how long that's going to last. And I want to hear from Ari how long that's going to last. My third, and he's down here, looks like he's a guest, but he's my co-host, is Roberto Cabrera. I have not actually ever been in the same room with Roberto Cabrera. I was just so impressed with his market report that he writes in New York. The newest one is Manhattan, What's Your Strategy? And it's where I got to learn about the New York market. So I asked him to be my co-host and ask intelligent questions about the New York market that I can't ask. So, we got more people to admit in. Why don't I turn to you, Ari? Why don't you give us an introduction about what you're seeing now that we've heard a little bit from Eileen about the most phenomenal market ever?
Eileen, you're taking all of our clients.
I know. Well, you know, we had a tough up and down since 2008. Trust me, we
paid your dues.
we realized, and And, we've always had, New York City moving out to Connecticut, Long Island. There's that, migration for years, but we've never had one like this.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Am I
Yeah, I mean, I think so, John. I would say, first of all, don't believe what you read in the news. It's never very accurate. Second of all, the New York City real estate market isn't a market. It's a market made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of sub-markets. And, when you speak to buyers or sellers or property owners, you're looking at what neighborhood they're in, what price point they have, what type of property they have, how long they've owned it, what their cost basis is, and a whole variety of other nuances that come into play. New York is definitely not dead. So I think we can start off with that. With that being said, it's certainly taken a sizable hit. You guys in Connecticut and the Burbs are some of the beneficiaries of that hit. But I would say there are a couple of high-level trends we're seeing. So one is, first off, just to state the obvious, when people talk about an exodus from New York City, there is no exodus from New York City. There's actually an exodus from Manhattan. And that's what the data shows. So if you look at, migration from the city, starting in, mid-late March, you're looking at people leaving the borough of Manhattan and going either to other boroughs or to suburban markets or other places in the country. It's interesting, by the way, as an anecdote and as a side note, if you look at the U.s. housing market as a whole, you'll see that basically the U.s. housing market has been going up this year, with the exception of the very high cost urban centers, which are primarily San Francisco and New York City. But I digress. Basically, what we're seeing is Manhattan has taken a bigger hit than Brooklyn. Lower priced properties are selling better than higher priced properties. Properties that are accessible to kind of like a first-time home buyer market are the ones that are faring best. And then a lot of the things that you would think would be relevant in a pandemic are, so outdoor space, ability to have a home office, a more boutique building where you don't have shared amenities, so on and so forth, have become more prized than they were, let's say, mid-March. Transaction volume dipped during the shutdown. So from March 22nd to June 22nd, we had a 3-month shutdown in New York City, during which we could not show properties in person. During that time, transaction volume hit a trough of about 20% of normal transaction volume. And there's sort of two ways to look at that. I mean, one is to say, okay, the market is down 80% from a volume perspective. The flip side is 20% of the market is functional even when buyers can't even visit properties in person, which was pretty extraordinary. Since the opening of phase 2, which for us was June 22nd, so we're about, 4 months into that, we've had, 4 active months. It's challenging. Every deal is like, carrying a boulder uphill 3 times over. We're exhausted. It's a mentally and emotionally draining market, but deals are getting done. The biggest hit to our market, hands down, has been the upper end, which has been driven by a lot of affluent buyers spending time in second homes and or physically not being here to purchase property, as well as a lot of our quote unquote family market. I don't know if I can use the F word from a fair housing perspective, but the family market, those folks that are tied into school calendar years, availability of schools, outdoor space, places for kids to run around, those folks have held off in many cases on purchases. I would say as a team, I think we're up to 42 or 44 sales that we've done since June 22nd. And of those sales, 90+% of them are young 20s, 30s, childless, white collar professional couples. So I'll leave it there.
Roberto, you got anything I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
No, Ari's 100% correct. I am a little, I wonder what the tremendous allure is about going to Brooklyn. I must ask a Brooklynite.
I mean, you used to, if you had a 718 zip code that was embarrassing, you didn't want to say that.
Right.
I mean, I think so. If you, and Roberto, obviously you're in the city physically. I've been in the city the whole time, by the way, haven't left. And if you walk around parts of Manhattan, even still today, it can feel like a zombie apocalypse. And if you walk around areas of Brooklyn, it can feel like, okay, kind of like a disjointed community and neighborhood with limited retail, but it's not dead. Like there's still energy and there's still people. There are parts of Manhattan where like, April, May, it was like a ghost town. like literally.
For sure. I think that's the way it is in Midtown, but I think the more what would be considered residential neighborhoods. I live on the Upper West Side, and I go to the Upper East Side a lot. My daughter goes to school there. You walk through those neighborhoods, if you didn't see masks, you might not recognize that we're in this time.
Sure.
Like it's very, very pedestrian. Everybody's out and about, and the city is functioning. It has life. But I just wonder what the exodus is to Brooklyn, and that is slowing down.
So I think it's driven by a couple of things. The homes are cheaper, so it's a price point thing. You've got more green space. You've got more ability to spread out. The homes are generally larger, and I think you have more ability to work from home and be surrounded by a community. I mean, the biggest hit that we've had to the New York City real estate market has been the lack of inbound traffic. And inbound traffic, by the way, is not just like, Taiwanese buyers buying penthouses on 57th Street. Inbound traffic is like, Greenwich, Connecticut couple downsizing and buying a home in Manhattan. Those people aren't buying. NYU parents aren't buying. People from California aren't buying pied-à-terres. I mean, so you remove all that inbound traffic, then you remove all the tourists, and then you remove all the commuter traffic, and you have a Manhattan that doesn't feel the same way as it used to in many areas. I agree with you, like downtown, uptown, there are neighborhoods you can walk through and with the exception of the masks, it feels basically somewhat normal. That's everywhere in Brooklyn. Like what you're describing Upper East, Upper West is basically the whole borough of Brooklyn.
Is any of that, so are you describing a higher percentage of crosstown moves? People are taking advantage of the situation to say, I think I might trade up. I'm a committed New Yorker and I'm sticking around, so I might as well trade out of my 2-bedroom to a 3, or my 3-bedroom to a 4, or to a better view.
So what I'm seeing is the biggest motivating factors for people who are buying right now are low interest rates, an ability to get on the purchase ladder because prices have come down somewhat. And by the way, not that much actually, but they've come down somewhat.
Let's quantify that. Pause. Quantify that below $1 million, say $1 million to 3, and then above 3. What's been the change, the delta in those, say, 3 markets?
So if you look at Manhattan, on average, transactions are down about 10 to 15% on average. Over 3 million, those numbers can hit 15, 20% or greater. Sub 1 million, those numbers are well below 10%, even maybe in like the 5 to 7% range. If you flip over to Brooklyn, on average, the decline is closer to 5%, 5, 6, 7, depending on whose data reports you look at. Sub 1 million, it can be as low as like 2 or 3%, almost no decline. And then over 3 or 4, which are still reasonably big numbers for Brooklyn, the declines can be like closer to, let's say, 10%. And those are, very broad numbers.
So I interrupted. You were talking about crosstown moves.
Yeah. So low interest rates and ability to get on a purchase ladder. A lot of other, and Roberta can probably relate to this, but a lot of other sort of qualitative elements to the market that are hard to quantify. Like I have a buyer right now who's looking at a place in Chelsea. So we see the property. We go back, we see it again. We go back, we bring an architect. We think about it. We research the building. She interviews everyone that walks through the lobby for 2 weeks. It's like, you have an ability to take your time and do things that you could never do in New York City, at least in my 13-year career. There is an ability to take your time and you have so much more leverage as a buyer. Ultimately, any market, any sub-economy is made up of supply and demand, and the demand has dropped off and the supply has gone up. And so the demand has a lot more power. And so people are walking away from purchases because of inspection issues or uncovering things during diligence that they, otherwise would have like glossed over, but now they're not glossing over it. So there's a very different dynamic, even if all of it isn't captured in the price. And then, why are some people moving otherwise? People are moving away from reliance on public transportation because they're not as focused on like, I have to commute and like, I need to be within 2 minutes of the express subway because I haven't taken a subway in 6 months. They're moving closer to parks. They're moving closer to friends. They're prizing private outdoor space, different things, I would say.
All right, now I want to key on some of those thoughts and shift over to Eileen and say, so tell me about pricing. Tell me about crosstown moves. I sense an equally imbalanced market, but in the other direction. Ari's got too much supply, too little demand, but you've got no supply.
No
Darien,
supply,
Connecticut.
no demand. And
So tell me what it's like.
Ari, so I have to tell you, 3 of my people that sold their properties and they took advantage of the prices in Manhattan. They moved into Manhattan. So that's a good thing. So I've seen people sell their homes, live there for years, and they're moving into Manhattan.
And was that always the plan, or do they sell their house, look around, find that there are no good, inexpensive downsizing options, and then they broaden their search, include Manhattan?
No, but the 3 that made such a move, they felt that this was a great time to buy in Manhattan and that it's going to come back and it's a good investment. That's what they told me. So I'm seeing a little bit of that. Our moves are basically, we're not having so much in town. We're having people move in. I mean, from Manhattan, we're having, I'd say, I've had more of that than I've had my in town.
So I think a lot of people had the perception that this was going to be a short-lived, that a lot of people were a lot of renters came out last season. Yeah. They went to the Hamptons. They saw that the Hamptons were picked over. And so they said, what can I rent on the Connecticut coast? And and I'll just try this out until the pandemic blows over. And yet we have a lot of people who bought. Tell me about the profile of these buyers. He used the F word. We won't use well, you can use the F word too, family. Are they families or were they across the board? Empty nesters, families, singles, professionals, blue collar, everything?
So are you talking about the purchases, moving from the city? And
who's buying Darien? Who's buying Connecticut?
I'd say I have mostly families, but believe it or not, I have quite a few young couples that are making the jump earlier. I mean, 25 to 30-year-olds that don't want to be in the city. Manhattan.
Is that Eileen? Do you find that you have more renters though than buyers?
I feel we've had a lot of renters. Right now, I feel we have more buyers. We don't have anything to rent. We have no rentals. I mean, skim. And it's interesting. I had 2 buyers that rented in Southampton, and they bought in Darien. They didn't like it. Wow. It was picked over the at. They felt that they felt that they could work from home from Darien and go to the city. I think the migration has been like a monumental change here, and that people are changing the way they live, how they work. They can work from home. They need outdoor space. They can have pools and a lifestyle, and they can work. They can be in Manhattan within an hour.
Let me just give you some numbers, and you can give me and help me out here, Eileen. But Darien and New Canaan are towns of 20,000 people, and 2 years ago they would have they would in the spring market have 300 to 350 houses available. Now we're down to half of that. So you still have 120 houses to buy in Darien.
That's correct.
And you have 170 in New Canaan. But to really put an underline under what Eileen said about the rental market in New Canaan or Darien might be down to 20 available rentals, 20, maybe 30. And if you look at and I did last week, the $10,000 to $20,000 band to rent a house in New Canaan, there were 5. So you're down to single digit number of choices in perhaps your band. If you need a 4 or 5 bedroom house for your family, you've got about 5 options. And I think that should harm our markets to have so little supply, so little opportunity for somebody to move into a market, try it out before they buy. And yet, Eileen, you're telling me that we have record number of transactions and we have a record number of pending transactions right now in the fall when they should be dropping off.
Exactly. And like, for example, Last year we had 264 sales this time of year. This year at this time we had 408 sales. And we really, I don't think we have as many rentals as you have, John. I have to actually, I think people are desperate for rentals. We have,
You don't even have 5?
I don't think we even have 5. We might have.
We have a lot.
Who has a lot?
We do.
Roberto,
Our inventory, all of this migration in every which way is making Manhattan the best deal around. And I think
exactly.
I think there's going to be a bit of a, not a bubble necessarily, but I do think that it's going to start to come back.
Now, wait a minute.
Listen, we were away for 6 months. I was away for 6 months. And when I came back, and I literally just walked into my apartment today and I was just outside and I was like, it feels good to be home. It's
Ari
nice here.
just said that you're down 5% in some categories. If I come to Manhattan, you're going to give me like a 5% off coupon. Are you kidding me? I want a deal. No, I don't go shop Macy's when they offer me 5% off. I'm not coming to Manhattan. I want 20% off. When's that going to happen?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen up there either.
Talk to me about the discount. It sounds like if 5% is it, that you in New York think this is going to be very short-lived. You think that this is where we see the light at the end of the tunnel and that we're going to be fine.
I don't feel this is going to be short-lived. I feel New York's going to come back, and I'm a native New Yorker. I love New York, and I think we're going to. It has calmed down, but I think we're going to see more of this here in Connecticut. Their friends are moving out. Clients of mine that were looking for a weekend home had just sent 2 of their friends out. They're loving the lifestyle. I think it's going to. I think we have it here for a while.
All right, I'm going to ask a very simple question, and any one of you can pick it up. But what I'm hearing is the prices haven't moved much from Ari. I heard that earlier before the call from Eileen, and Barbara Gronseth, who's on the call, said make sure you point that out, because a lot of people in Connecticut are reading the headlines and they think, great, I can add another 15, 20% to the price of my house and get it. Not happening.
Not happening.
Okay. And Roberto, I'm also not going to get 15, 20% off the price of my house if I try and sell in New York right now. Why aren't we seeing price movement? Why aren't we seeing the price movement? Why are we all talking about 5% shifts in price?
Well, in Manhattan, you have to realize that for the past probably 5 years, the market has been slowly softening and softening and softening. So we've come down quite a bit, and we don't have, there's still room, but it's not going to fall off a cliff. And also, we had spoken about this last week. People are getting accustomed to what's in front of us. There's a little more education and understanding about what we need to do in order to get through this. Whereas back in March and April and May, we had no idea what was going on at all. We were all shut up in our homes and we had no idea what to expect. And I do, like Ari said, prices have come down. They haven't come down that much. It's all relative. They've come down, but buyers expect 20%, sellers expect it to be pre-COVID pricing. And there's a place in between. And as you go up the scale, there is a little more elasticity, but it's just going to take some time. And I think that the exodus towards you guys is going to moderate. It's going to moderate.
Level.
All right. Nobody else wants to talk about price?
Ari, you think the same?
I can talk about price.
I have to tell you, honestly, we are not getting more money. And it's interesting because supply and demand, our supply is low, right? And would usually push up prices, but they're not. I mean, they're not pushing up our prices. I mean, maybe in time, I call this a time of discovery because we really will know.
Eileen and I have a client in common, and he's had his house on the market for a while, and we rented it last year for double what it had been previously renting for. And when he came and he said, I think I'm going to raise the price. I'm going to put it out there for sale. I'm going to raise the price. Eileen and we shook our heads and we were like, oh, but he can't get it. And then I said, you know what? Wait a minute. Maybe he can. You know what? Maybe he just needs to repaint and spruce it up and take care of some of the issues. Who am I to say? I mean, I'm no genius. I've never seen a market like this before. maybe he is going to get this. Maybe we have not yet seen the price movement. And maybe it's coming, because we have to go through this period where there's really no inventory and people have to reset their expectations on what it's going to cost to buy in this case, 6,000 square foot house on 3 acres in central Darien. I guess that was 2.5 million last year. He's not necessarily wrong to ask 3 million this year.
And
He might get it.
He paid 3.7 for it.
He paid 3.7. Yeah,
I was on
memories are long. So if you paid
What year?
3.7 at the height of the market, the 08 market, 07, 08.
07.
Yeah. So
I-
Darien, you know what? I got to give it to some of these guys. They want to ask 3 million, 3.2, and they paid 3.7. It might just come back.
Well, they're seeing the low inventory and, supply and demand. This is the time of discovery. Maybe it will come back.
Don't you think, hi, it's Dorothy Mulroy. And just what we haven't talked about is technology. So technology with the pandemic has kind of probably brought us 10 years to where we would be normally, everybody having the availability to work at home. I feel like the Manhattan market, it will come back because it's Manhattan, but you really have to factor in technology. People can work from home now. So now you have people that are not confined to be in the city, and they can have the lifestyle that they want, whether they're single, whether they're married. So that makes the burbs really desirable. And, I think when people start getting that experience and their friends come and family come, Manhattan doesn't look so attractive other than going in. I mean, I live in Greenwich and I wouldn't live in a city because it takes me, 40 minutes to get in and go to the theater and everything else. So I think technology is going to really probably dictate more than just economics for a lot of people.
Were you ever a New Yorker?
Yeah, I grew up in Queens. Yeah, and I still
can't
have.
Hear it in your accent.
You can't?
No, I can't hear your accent.
After a cocktail, you will. Trust me. But I think technology is a big driving force for a lot of people, and I think it's going to really change the market, whether it's the city or the burbs.
Can I respond to that point? So I have a couple counterpoints to make on that. First is just to say, I have no ability to predict the future. None of us have an ability to predict the future, yet we have a high confidence in our ability to predict the future, which is always an interesting conundrum to me. With that being said, a couple things. Zoom wasn't invented in March. FaceTime wasn't invented in March. The technology's been there for over a decade. And if you look at US demographic trends, we have been moving towards more urbanized environments, both within suburban communities and urban communities across the US during the last decade, during which time you could argue we've had probably the greatest advent of technological growth since essentially the Industrial Revolution. So, we're all walking around with, these things in our hands, and yet we want to be closer together. I think that we all have a relatively short-term mindset, and you will see that when we get to the other side of this, whenever that is, we'll revert to the same lifestyle that we were living previously. Human beings have lived in urban and close-knit environments essentially for thousands of years, and we have worked together physically in the same spaces for thousands of years. And I think what you're going to find is that work from home as a short-term solution based on pandemic and other factors has obviously changed the way we live, but I don't think it's going to be as permanent as one might think it would be. And by the way, just to put a point on that, the biggest technology companies in the world, Facebook, Apple, Google, Netflix, etc., are the biggest office leasing companies in Manhattan right now. They are taking the most office space in Manhattan, and they are by definition technology companies. So I would caution that. I would say be careful. Everyone's not going to live in the suburbs and work from home. And part of what you're going to see is there will be a domino effect. So what's going to happen is, and I've seen this in companies, the CEO or senior people start to go back to the office, and other people say, shit, Joe's in the office, I need to be in the office. And then they go to the office, and other people say, well, I can't work from home because they're in the office. And then they go to the office, and before long, everyone's back in the office. It works when 100% of the people are at home. It's not going to work. Like if 50% are in the office and 50% at home, who gets promoted? Who gets, comes up with great ideas? So respectfully, I would say temper that expectation somewhat, I think you're going to find that we revert to the mean, because that's essentially what happens historically.
Hmm.
It's a bit of a tipping point. You say when enough people are back in the office, we all got to go back to the office.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's going to happen. Watch.
You don't look like you're in your office. I mean, there's not even a window.
I'm in my little Peloton room in my house, but but I go to the office a couple times a week. I'm out and about. I take the subway, you know, like I'm doing the whole thing. So it doesn't bother me.
The only, just to respond to that briefly, the only thing is, because initially we thought it was going to be self-limited, but the data shows that people are being just as productive from home. So nobody knew how successful people would be at home with all the distractions, but apparently they're able to do it. Businesses continuing, nothing's shutting down. So it would be obviously, if you have a boss and his employees are productive, happy at home, why bring them back? I mean, I agree, definitely being in the office in front of the boss is where you really want to be. But if the boss is in the Hamptons or he's someplace else and enjoying life, it may be a tough sell.
I think that's right when you're counting it in months. I don't think that is as relevant when you're counting it in years. So I think what's going to happen is, and I'm hearing this from friends in the city who own companies, who are senior, et cetera, is how do you promote someone? How do you demote someone? How do you come up with new concepts? How do you come up with a new product? Part of what happens is we're banking on equity that we have, and by equity, I mean like personal equity that we have built up over months, if not years or decades of working together. Like my team is very functional right now. I have 13 people. We barely have seen each other in the last 8 months, but we're working really well together. But I've known some of these people for 12 years. So it's very different. I'm trying to bring new people onto my team right now. And it's is it working with Daniel? Is it not? I don't know. I'm not sure what he's doing. I think you're right, but I don't think it's as consequential as we might think it feels in the short term. I think that we as human beings are wired to seek short-term solutions when we feel uncomfortable. And right now we all feel uncomfortable. And I think that to Roberto's point, it's starting to temper a little bit. People are taking the subway a little more. People are taking planes a little more. You'll see. I think it's gonna stabilize somewhat. The best predictor of the future is usually the past.
That will be when we all look back, right?
So
Yep.
there's a question that keeps coming up. It comes up in the chat window and it comes up in our office meetings, and it is the question of referrals. And I keep hearing the question, why? What do I need to do to get business referred to me? And I think for the first time, it sort of goes both ways. How do we get, because Connecticut has been asking in a very slow market for a very long time, how do we get New Yorkers to pay attention to us and refer business out of the city to us? Ari, Roberto, you could be asking the question now, hey, what about all those Connecticut people who are selling their houses and looking to downsize into the city? What are you doing to refer business into the city? Yesterday, I had a friend of the family who happens to be sitting in Buenos Aires, and he said, I want to spend $1 million and I'm going to come back and maybe I can get a little 1-bedroom condo in Darien or New Canaan next to my kids in Greenwich and in New York City, or maybe I'll get a little 1-bedroom apartment. And so I immediately sent him to, Roberto, and I said, Roberto, why don't you tell him about how the prices haven't come down on $1 million apartments in New York City? And you did. Let's talk about referrals. My thesis is that I've never felt comfortable enough because I didn't know my New York counterparts well enough, and I didn't know enough about the New York market to refer intelligently. And my clients know that. So they didn't ask me. They just go into New York and see if they can find somebody through their New York connections. So I think that calls like this that connect us to each other from market to market are going to do a lot toward a successful referral business. What do you think, Eileen? You've been doing this a long time.
Great. I refer into New York all the time. Not too much to Brooklyn though, and I should, to be honest with you. I think I had one go to Brooklyn, but I haven't received referrals from Manhattan in the 10 years I've been here, except this year. Whereas my first 10 years in real estate, I had received quite a few referrals from Manhattan. So I've always seen the movement from New York to Connecticut. And as I said, I'm from New York. I grew up in Queens, Whitestone on the Water. And so I've always seen that movement. I've never seen a massive movement like we've seen this year, is what I said early on. But I've always sent back to New York. And we have not seen the referrals come from the city, which is surprising to me because they are coming. They come to my open houses, they walk in. And there's a lot of money we can all make doing that.
How about you, Ari? You've got 13
Ari?
people on the team. Are you
Ari?
referring out?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that's always amazed me, I haven't been doing it as long as Eileen, but I'm doing it for, quite a number of years, is we don't get a lot of the leads until they've already happened. Like I get a lot of these like, oh, I went out to Connecticut, past couple weekends and I found a broker I like and we're buying the place or whatever. Like I hear too late a lot of times in the process. I think that we as brokers, myself included, and shame on me, need to do a better job in both our interpersonal and larger marketing efforts of explaining our ability to connect folks with brokers in the tri-state metro area and obviously beyond. Every now and again I get a referral, but a lot of times it's like I hear after, like a really good friend of mine who's a client just told me he bought in Shelter Island. They already bought, they closed, and I found that after the fact. So I think a lot of us do. I had a real estate coach years ago who said to me, everyone's a client. Some of them I might get 25% of the deal and some of them I might get 100%, but everybody's a client. And I never really implemented that in practice.
I think that the Zillow phenomenon and maybe the Street Easy also, I mean, all that information on, to your point, Shelter Island is out there. And so the natural inclination is to go shopping, window shopping online and try and educate themselves in the market. And I guess they're wondering, what do we as agents, what value do we add in the referral? And we're not doing a very good job of assessing that value add and communicating it. How about you, Roberto? You ever refer anything out here to Connecticut?
I'm not referring anything out to Connecticut, but and it's tricky. I had a client just recently who was moving to Miami, and I did a lot of research. I emailed a ton of brokers in a couple of our offices in Palm Beach, Miami Beach, and spoke to the guy. Guy has a tremendous amount of experience who I referred him to. I said, look, this is really important. He's probably going to rent first, but he's going to buy something in a year. And I want to build that relationship. And he said to me, he said, look, it's a rental. We don't make a lot of money. I said, I'm looking for money. I want him to be taken care of. If you buy something in the future, we'll work that out. The relationship just went up in flames. It was horrible. And it looked horrible upon me. And I did everything in my power to try to vet out who, I must have personally spoken to 5 different people, and the person I chose just happened not to go well. So it's difficult to do.
I think the internet has changed that for us though, too, You see a lot of these buyers wanting to look online.
Yeah.
Yep. So if somebody called me and said, I'm interested in Darien, I would say, it's a really tight market. Yeah. I've already looked at Zillow. And I would say, what you need is an experienced broker who probably knows what the shadow inventory looks like in Darien, knows properties that are coming on the market, knows which properties have been on a while and might have some room. You really need to work with somebody who's in that town. I live 5 miles from Darien, and I know that I don't know where all the bodies are buried in Darien. Eileen knows where all of the shadow inventory is and all this upcoming inventory is. And if I told one of my clients that, who was thinking about Darien, I think that's a rather compelling argument. Roberto, he's going to know about apartments that are thinking about making a move. You should talk to Roberto. You should talk to Ari. Don't you think that that's probably one of the most compelling things we can do in an imbalanced market?
For
Absolutely.
sure. I refer people to Brooklyn. I have a couple of people who are really know Brooklyn very, very well. I mean, I could easily go in there, especially if it's a client that's worth working with. If they wanted to buy a townhouse for $3 or $4 million, I could learn the market, but I also don't feel like I'm serving them. I'd rather hand them to someone who knows every nook and cranny of how it works. And, that's not my backyard. So, I would call Ari, or I would call someone else who I know. And that's just here in New York.
And I see I see a mortgage broker on the call, and that also begs the question. We're much more comfortable referring a mortgage broker to somebody as part of our deal, but I don't think we're just in the habit, like we could be, to refer business out of market or even to Brooklyn, as you point out.
I have a question about people's just marketplaces. What scares you most about your marketplaces?
What do you mean scare?
Like for me, what scares me most about my marketplace is the level of rental inventory, because the buy rent proposition is bound to put a much more downward pressure on the sale price than already has. I think but there's still, it's a quandary, and there's no one size fits all scenario. Every single situation is unique, and it all has to come in context. Like, I have a client who's looking at, there's a property that just came on the market, and he wanted to see it. And today I heard that they had something like 12 people come through, and they probably have 2 or 3 offers just within days. And he's like, I'm not getting involved in an auction situation at this point. That's just what the terminology he used. And, there are pockets of things that are selling really fast, but how long is that going to last in certain pockets? Is it going to be I don't think it's a blanket situation, but so for me, on a general level, as far as the ocean rising and falling, I think there's going to be some downward pressure until the rental inventory gets, at least a portion of it gets absorbed. Ari, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, one of the things that I always remind people is New York City is the inverse of the U.S. housing market from a renter-owner perspective. So yep. Roughly 2/3 of Americans own their homes, 1/3 rent. Roughly 2/3 of New York rent their homes, 1/3 own. We are a renter's city. People forget that, and obviously you and I make our money not from renters, but we are a renter's city. And we have, as a team, we have a couple big landlord accounts, and it's a disaster. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's a total dumpster fire. You have higher vacancy rates than you've had in years. You have landlords that are tied to very high gross rents because of institutional capital or other reasons to sort of like inflate their numbers. You've got tenants who, expect the sun, moon, and the stars. We're now, by the way, as everybody knows, out of peak season because we're now into the fall. The rental market is bad. And it's particularly bad in Manhattan. And the problem with the rental market is the sales market can be solved to a certain extent by supply and demand side economics, meaning like I'm an owner, I own a place, it's worth $2 million. If it goes to 1.9 or 1.8, I'll sell, but if it goes to 1.6, I'm gonna keep it. If I'm a landlord, I have to fill the space, like it's heads and beds at a certain point. I don't have the option of just leaving half my building vacant. It's not a possibility, but I need people to physically sleep in these beds. But where are the people? Where are the new classes of attorneys? Where are the NYU grads? Where are the people, coming to work at Google, Facebook, insurance companies, JP Morgan, et cetera? The rental market is a problem. The other thing is, we didn't say this before, but I think it's important to say, when we say that prices are down 5% or 10% or 15%, the thing we're leaving out is the absorption. So the number of transactions at those levels has dropped precipitously. So even if you can get a deal done and it's, let's say, 7% or 6% off of pre-COVID pricing, that's great. But you don't necessarily have 10 buyers behind that buyer. And that's a problem. So yeah, I think the rental market is an issue, and it's going to be a big issue this winter because we've come off peak season and we've come off pent up pricing. And you still have, portfolios in Manhattan that have 15% vacancy rates where they were at 1% pre-COVID. I mean, you're talking about not hundreds of units, not thousands, but like tens of thousands of units.
Wow.
That was a lot. Dumpster fire, heads and beds. Wow. I don't even know what.
I have no filter, John. So yeah.
market in Manhattan, if you have them under market rents, they don't go?
So there's a price
mean,
for everything. The
I have,
problem
I
Yeah,
have several buildings. He has full, they're all full. He has them on the market. So that wouldn't change it?
So the problem that we're facing is what landlords have been doing to play the game is to offer free months and keep the gross rent very high. But at a certain point, you get to a point where tenants just say, I can't afford the gross rent. Like I can't pay that number, so it doesn't work. I don't qualify off of the gross rent. I don't want to deal with potentially renewing off of the gross rent. I just want a reduction. Like I just want to pay $3,000 a month. I don't care if it says $4,000 on a piece of paper, but I'm getting a couple months free. I just want to pay the $3,000. And the landlords won't do it because the problem is we all see the world through our lens, and all of my landlords think this is short term. After the election, it's going to be great. We're going to get a vaccine. I don't want to lock this in for 12 months at this low rent. But if every landlord does that, then to Roberto's point, you have a buildup of inventory.
Right.
That was us not too long ago, Eileen. If you had a, I don't know, $4 or $5 million house in New Canaan, there was a very thin market for that. And I know that anything in Darien or New Canaan that was at $5 million had an average expectation of a couple of years to sell. It didn't matter how well priced it was, and you could drop it by $1 million, and often nothing would happen. So, we feel your pain.
Manhattan's a rental city. I mean, they have more rentals than. So I would think that if they dropped them, that they would rent. But
well, I learned from Roberto yesterday that what I just learned now: 2/3 of everybody in New York is a renter, and 2/3 of all renters are co-ops. Yes, no, owners are co-ops. Is that also true? And co-ops can't be rented. Is that true?
Very difficult.
There are limitations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hard.
Very difficult.
So Ari, what questions do you have of Connecticut?
The question everybody in New York is asking, and this is probably the wrong question, but this is a question everybody's asking. We all see it as, oh my God, everyone's moving to the suburbs. All these people are buying these houses. But what I always say is, who's selling the houses? Who's selling? Why are they selling? And where are they going? And you've sort of answered some of that, but I would be curious to hear more about that.
Go ahead.
Well, if they want to make an in-town move, now's the time to sell. They'll be paying up probably a little bit maybe, but they know they can sell their house. And they weren't able to do that. That wasn't the case pre-COVID, right? They were worried about it. So now they know, wow, we can sell our house, get a fair price, and we make a move. And we have quite a few people leaving the state, going to South Carolina and Florida, and taxes are better there. So they're leaving, and this is the time for them to leave. I've had people say, oh, we're going to sell next year, but we'll sell this year. We hear there are buyers out there. So we're seeing a lot of that. People selling now, making the moves. And actually, even some of them are selling and wanting to rent, but the rentals are so scarce, they don't know where they're going to go except to Avalon, right, John? We have Avalon. They go to Avalon.
So I'll answer that. Traditionally, Ari, think of it as third. 1/3 was crosstown moves. People trading up to a bigger place, more land, whatever it was, or crosstown moves, downsizing. So 1/3 of everybody was crosstown moves. 1/3 of the New Canaan, Darien, say Greenwich market, I would say is the trade up from the surrounding area. So if you've come out from the city and you're in, I don't know, maybe a small 100-year-old place, it's your starter home, and then you trade up into maybe the Darien market or the Greenwich market or the New Canaan market because you want the school system. Big driver in these towns for why do people buy. And then I would say 1/3 came from way out of the area, transferred in from London or what have you. Why do they sell? The converse is also true. A lot of these people, after they've educated their kids here and they don't need the big 6,000 square foot house anymore, they look to the condo market. Now, New Canaan has 700 condos, 700 condos and 7,000 houses. Darien only has 100 condos. So a lot of the people, when they sell, downsize out of Darien, they look around, they find there are no condo alternatives. So they either go to New York and buy that pied a terre from you and Roberto, or they come over, they look around in the surrounding area and they look at the condo market in New Canaan or Greenwich. Right? How am I doing?
Exactly. We don't have condos in Darien, so we send them to John in New Canaan, or Rob Johnson in Greenwich, or we'll send them to
But
our.
you're building them as fast as you can. And that's
Yeah.
a change in the Connecticut market, is that New Canaan's building 100 across the street from me now in the downtown, because we're starting to recognize that if we lose our seniors to Florida and North Carolina and warmer and Arizona, then we're losing an important demographic in our community. And we'll just leave it at that. But not everybody should be here because they have school-age children. We want a nice cross-section. We want a great diversity. We want an economic diversity. We want all kinds of diversity. Demographic diversity is important. So we're building condos.
Are you finding that the impact of SALT on your market has subsided because buyers are just desperate to get into homes now?
What was that again? Sorry,
The impact of the cap on SALT deductions, I assume, was a negative impact on your market for the past couple of years. Are you finding that buyers are less focused on that because they're just desperate to get into properties?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. That's
Regarding, I think what happened was people who had multiple homes. I think Greenwich was hit hard. If you had 3 or 4 homes, the Greenwich houses with the SALT tax came in, but I don't think anymore it's kind of a fact of life. I think the initial impact is over.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Yeah,
I agree with that. And it took a couple of years for the SALT tax, but once you accept that as we're the frog sitting in this, water that's getting hotter and hotter, and the taxes go up, and pretty soon we just accept the fact that the taxes are going up, and there's nothing we could do about it. We're not going to get that reversed. I think, all right, so I'll turn it back to you, Ari. Are your wealthy clients thinking now about the impact of capital gains changes in the current election and the two different approaches to capital gains? Is that a driver of real estate decisions? I think it is in the back of people's minds, that affects their timing perhaps, but I don't think it affects their ultimate decision. If they're going to Florida, they're going to Florida. If they're a seller, they're still a seller, even if they have to pay a higher tax. Would you agree?
I have not heard one single client mention capital gains tax, not one. So I think it's not at all relevant for our market. What I would say is very relevant, which is why I asked the SALT deduction, is real estate taxes and carrying costs overall. And a lot of people are talking about the fear of the city being in financially dire straits and having to raise what are already, in many cases, very high real estate taxes that are, by the way, no longer deductible, even further. One of the things that I do, not a lot of, but I do a good amount of, is some new development work on the sponsor and the developer side. And the tax assessments that are coming in by the city for these buildings are just, they're asinine. And it makes some of the units almost unsaleable. And we think back to, the heydays of Bloomberg when all these buildings had tax abatements. That's a real issue. And it's more relevant, I think, for our buyers and sellers because they can look at a spreadsheet and see like, okay, my cost is $8,000 a month, but now it's $9,500 or whatever the delta is. And it's like simple math that they can do. And it's relevant to today right now. And I would go out on a limb and say that if our interest rates weren't as low as they are, we would be suffering much more as a city.
What do you think that it costs to carry? What does it cost between taxes and your common charges for a $2 million apartment in the city? And what do you think it costs in Eileen's Darien in terms of taxes and cost for a $2 million house? Is that an unfair question?
compared to New York.
Yeah, what do New
think it's
Yorkers
all-
think that they're getting maybe do they think it's substantially better or do they think, yeah, it's about the same?
My experience dealing with city clients is that a lot of them are highly uneducated in terms of the cost of truly owning a home. And that when they start to think about like landscaping and owning 2 cars and, you know, potentially a train ticket if they're going to be commuting and all these other things that are associated with owning a home, by the way, heating it and cooling it and maintaining it, I think I'm a brownstone owner myself. I think they vastly underestimate what it's going to actually cost them. And they come to realize that they're actually probably not saving money. They're just spending it in different ways.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
So what's the taxes on a $2 million house in Darien, Connecticut? Eileen?
Well, it varies on whether it's brand new construction, how old it is. I have one right here on the market. The taxes are $24,000 on a house that's almost 2 million. I'd say 2,800,000.
2.8. Okay.
So
24
yeah.
grand on 2.8.
20,000 on a 2.8 house. I'd
And
say they range.
If we put aside Ari's 2 cars and the cost of those 2 cars, what's it going to cost to heat that house on a typical month? About $800 to heat it or cool it?
Depends on what type of heat. Do they have geothermal? What kind of heating do they have? I'd say probably 800.
Okay.
But unless new.
How are we doing, Ari? Do we look attractive to a New Yorker?
Still seems pretty attractive. 24 grand doesn't sound too bad for a $2.8 million house.
Send them out. Send them out.
You're probably talking 20,000, 22,000
For what?
for 2 million. We're talking about 20,000 probably.
Okay.
What's it in New Canaan? New Canaan might be a little higher.
And do you have homeowners associations or anything like that?
Only the condos. Nope. Nobody. I would say there's very few, 1-2% have an additional association cost. If you have a private road, a cul-de-sac, you might all chip in for the snow plowing. But
We have 2 waterfront. Tokenique Association as a private tax in the Norton Bay.
I'm imagining those are very small homeowner charges, right? It's just for
Right.
the snow plowing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Come on out. It's nice out here and cheap.
Yeah.
There's an emotional quotient that's unquantifiable.
Okay. Okay.
Which,
You're
by
not
the
going to
way,
quantify it for me?
Can't.
I know it because one of my high school.
Ari lives in a beautiful townhouse.
So one of my high school friends is in the Trump building on the West Side Highway. I don't know if it still has Trump's name on it, but it's in I would say it's 68th Street overlooking the river. And he's got 4 kids and I've got 4 kids and I put him in public school here. And I feel like I am paying low taxes and have a phenomenal school system. And then I have the better deal. And he says, I don't care. I love it here in New York and I can't imagine it any other way. And I can't imagine spending 2 hours. He's a banker on with one of the big banks on Wall Street. And he can't imagine losing 2 hours of his life on the commute on Metro North every day. I get that. So there's a convenience factor. And as Roberto points out, there's an emotional factor that keeps him there. Cost be damned.
Where was he the last 6 months?
Holed up in his New York apartment. He smashed together 2 apartments together. So he's got, I don't know, enough he's got enough space, I think. And he tells me, yeah, they've been holed up in the apartment that whole time. He did call a lot and say, you got any rentals in Connecticut? And I said, nope. And then he looked in New Jersey and there was nothing. And then he looked to see if he could go to Europe and not allowed. And so I think he like a lot of New Yorkers was stuck. Definitely wanted to rent, but no way, no amount of money. Wild horses couldn't drag him out of New York.
Is he looking for a second home somewhere now?
He has been. Yeah, he has been. He kept thinking he might like a lakefront community in New Jersey. And then he was looking, he's got a brother in Riverside, Greenwich, who says it's really nice there and has a boat. So yeah, he was toying with the idea of boating and suburban life. But as you point out, there's an emotional factor that he won't leave the city. All right, we're coming up on the end of the hour. I guess we'll go around to each of you and you could I guess, any parting words or conclusions or whatever you like to say. Eileen?
Well, I think New York's going to do just fine Ari, and I'm a New Yorker, and I can certainly relate to your friend who wouldn't leave and stay there through no matter what. So it's going to recover. You know, we've been through markets where markets change in the blink of an eye, but I do believe it always has a heartbeat. So right now you're running into some headwinds there, but in Brooklyn probably, right? But I do believe we have benefited with the coronavirus, people wanting to have more space, and I'm hoping they keep their homes in Connecticut and keep their apartments in the city. That's my wish for everybody. So they'll have
Yeah,
two
we
places.
only need 1% of New Yorkers to think that this is a good idea to radically affect our markets.
We like the fact that they're liking it here a little bit more than going out to Montauk, but I think Montauk's benefited too. So it's be a lifestyle.
Sorry, you're optimistic.
I'm optimistic by nature, otherwise I couldn't do what we do. So yes, I am very much optimistic. I mean, look, I have a medium to long-term viewpoint. You can't not have that viewpoint in our business. So, you know, markets will ebb and flow. Some deals will be easy, some will be hard. Unfortunately, as New Yorkers and as New York real estate professionals, and Roberta can relate to this, it's not a very fun time to do what we do. Like the deals are really painful and people are kind of cranky. That being said, it'll come back, you know? I mean, we had 2013, 14, 15 when it was like you opened a door and 20 people showed up and, you know, you were a hero. So we all easily forget. I feel good about New York. I feel good about the city, but I also feel good about, you know, the burbs. I think everything has something to offer and people will figure it out. And, you know, I don't know. I don't think very short term. So that's my 2 cents. And I don't think anyone in this business should. If they do, they're probably in the wrong business.
Yeah.
But in the short term, you could hook me up with like a killer deal on a New York apartment, right?
I mean, you could take that $1 million 1 bedroom and you might be able to get it for $950. So there you go.
And did I lose Roberta? Where's Roberta? Oh,
no, I'm here. I would just say, listen, I agree with everything that Ari says, and I think that it's going to be a methodical, positive step, but I think it's going to be really positive. And I think when in 4 or 5 years, we're going to look back and this is actually going to feel like a very short period of time that this occurred.
Yes. Yes. I guess I'm just wondering whether we're going to bounce back in the spring or are we going to have one more season of like we had last year of anxiety and rental and a rush to rentals in the spring market. You know, I wonder if some of that anxiety is going to be with us in this coming spring market. I think everybody's wondering what's the effect of the election and what's the effect of COVID on our upcoming spring market. I want to thank my 3 guests. This was phenomenal. I want to thank all of you who came. I saw some familiar faces like Scott Hobbs who were on last week, and I hope you'll join us again next week. I think that this is a lot of fun. I hope some of you, like you, Greg Sages, I hope you'll participate next week and ask questions. Good to see you. Hey, Greg. Greg's sitting there in Greenwich, right? Yes. He runs the Glass House. He runs the world famous Philip Johnson Glass House, which is a museum on 40 acres here in New Canaan. So when he's not watching Getting Smart on Real Estate, he's running one of the most phenomenal treasures in all of Connecticut or the country. So
49 acres, they can't be subdivided, John.
49 acres. And if things get much worse, are you going to be renting that out to some well-heeled New Yorker next year?
I think my neighbors would blow a gasket.
I think they might. And on that, I'm going to say goodbye, everybody. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you next Thursday. Same link, Thursday, 4 o'clock. Thanks.
Thanks for the invite.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.